Welcome to Pathfinding.
Today we're diving into something you might think you already know. You know, that famous story from Genesis, the creation of Eve from Adam's rib.
Oh, yeah. Everyone's heard that one.
Right, exactly. But we're going to look at it maybe a little differently than you have before. Just to refresh everyone's memory, the verses go. So the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep, and while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs and then closed up the place with flesh. Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man. So we're not looking at that in the traditional way today.
No, not at all. We're going beyond the literal rib and the image of a single atom.
Right. We're going to explore a really interesting paper called Evolutionary Analysis of the Creation of Eve from Adam's Rib by Peter Moonson.
It's a fascinating paper.
Yeah, and it offers a totally different way to think about this story. It's not every day you see evolutionary biology applied to a classic biblical text. It's a unique approach, wouldn't you say?
Definitely unique. It kind of makes you rethink how you look at these old stories.
It really does. So what's the main argument? What's the core of Moonson's idea here?
Well, the central idea is that this Genesis story is not so much a literal account of creation as it is a metaphor.
Okay, a metaphor for what?
It's a metaphor that describes the whole process of human evolution, especially the emergence of us, Homo sapiens. It's like the ancient writers were trying to express something really deep about our origins, using the language and concepts they had. And in a way, what they came up with actually lines up pretty well with what science tells us today.
Okay, that's pretty wild. And the paper talks about Adam not just being one guy, right?
Right. Moonson points out that in the Bible, Adam is sometimes a name, and sometimes it just means humankind in general. He even connects it to the Hebrew word for red ground, Adama.
Oh, interesting.
So it's like humanity itself is rooted in the earth, just like in the creation story. So right away, Adam isn't just one individual.
It's like representing all of early humanity. Now, what about that whole deep sleep part? That always seemed pretty straightforward.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. But Moonson suggests that the deep sleep is actually a metaphor for extinction.
Whoa. Okay, extinction. How so?
Well, think about it. Even today, we use the word sleep to talk about death sometimes, like when we say we put a pet to sleep. And in the New Testament, Jesus even talks about dead people as being asleep.
Right.
So
Yeah.
if sleep can be a metaphor for one person dying, then a deep sleep could be like a whole bunch of people dying or, a whole species going extinct.
Oh, I see. Like all those different types of early humans that died out, the different hominin species.
Exactly.
That's a really cool interpretation. So we got deep sleep equals extinction events. Now, how about the rib? That seems like the hardest part to interpret metaphorically.
Yeah, you'd think so, right. But Moonson argues that the rib is really more of a symbol. He thinks it's best understood as a branch or an offshoot, like how the Bible often uses trees and branches to represent family lines and connections. And, the Hebrew word for rib, zela, it can mean side or annex or even offshoot. It's not just talking about a bone.
Offshoot makes a lot of sense when you think about evolution, like those branching diagrams showing how different species evolved from a common ancestor.
Absolutely. That's what makes this interpretation so compelling.
Is there anywhere else in the Bible where the word rib is used this way, like not literally?
Actually, yeah, there is. In Daniel 7.5, the Aramaic word for ribs, which is ilan, is used to represent 3 different kingdoms in the Medo-Persian Empire.
Wow, okay, so it's not unheard of to use ribs as a symbol for separate groups or entities.
Not at all.
That's amazing. The paper also talks about how the physical structure of ribs, like branching out from the spine, is kind of like the branching patterns we see everywhere in nature, even in those evolutionary trees.
Exactly. It's like that branching pattern is built into the very structure of life. It's
Yeah.
everywhere, our blood vessels, trees, even river deltas. And of course, it's the basic pattern of evolution too. So the idea of the rib as a branch makes even more sense.
It does. So then we come to woman or Eve.
Right. And in this evolutionary reading, she's not just the first human female.
No.
Now, Moonson suggests that woman, or Eve, which in Hebrew is chava and is associated with life, represents female Homo sapiens as a whole. And ultimately, it leads to the idea of mitochondrial Eve.
Mitochondrial Eve. Remind me who that is.
That's the most recent common ancestor of all living humans on the maternal side. Anthropologists have traced her back to around 200,000 years ago.
Wow, 200,000 years. So if we're putting it all together, Adam is early hominins, the deep sleep is extinction, the rib is Homo sapiens branching off, and Eve is the rise of female Homo sapiens and that ancestral maternal line. It's like a totally new way to see this story.
Right, it's like a complete reimagining of the whole thing.
And what's really striking to me is how well this lines up with what we know about human evolution from anthropology. It's not just some abstract idea. It actually mirrors the real scientific discoveries about our past.
That's what's so fascinating about it. It really does align. I mean, anthropology shows us that there were lots of different hominin species around back then, not just one Adam and Eve.
Right, like Adam would be all those early humans.
Exactly, Adam in the collective sense. And then most of those earlier species, they went extinct, which fits with the deep sleep.
The deep sleep.
And then, of course, we have Homo sapiens emerging as a distinct lineage, which is like the rib branching off. And within Homo sapiens, we have the emergence of mitochondrial Eve, which the story represents as made into a woman. It's like the broad strokes of that Genesis narrative really do match up with the scientific understanding of our origins, at least when you see it metaphorically.
It really makes you think about how these two totally different fields, ancient texts and modern science might be telling the same story in different languages.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It really is. But why does this evolutionary interpretation just feel so right?
Well, for a few reasons. First, as we've been talking about, it gives us a way to understand the Genesis story that doesn't contradict what science tells us. It lets us have a conversation between these two different ways of looking at the world.
Like they're not necessarily in conflict.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Second, it acknowledges that the Bible, especially those early books, uses a lot of metaphorical language. Like the creation week itself is often interpreted symbolically. So interpreting this rib story as a metaphor isn't that much of a stretch.
It's not like we're saying the Bible is a science textbook, right? We're just exploring a different layer of meaning in the story.
Exactly. And the third reason this interpretation feels right is how the word Adam seems to shift in those verses. It starts off meaning all those early humans, and then maybe it becomes more specific, referring to just Homo sapiens.
I see.
That kind of change in meaning fits really well with the idea of a larger group giving rise to a more specific one, which is what evolution is all about.
Right. The paper actually lays out the verses with those metaphorical meanings attached to the words. It's pretty amazing to read it that way.
It is. It completely changes how you see it. When you read, "So the Lord God caused a deep sleep, so hominin extinctions to fall upon the man, so hominins, and while he slept, took one of his ribs, the branch of Homo sapiens, and closed up its place with flesh. And the rib that's Homo sapiens that the Lord God had taken from the man, so from the hominins he made into a woman, and that's Homo sapiens mitochondrial Eve, and brought her to the man, brought her to Homo sapiens."
Wow, that's pretty powerful. It makes you see those verses in a whole new light.
It really does.
It's certainly an interpretation I'd never considered before. The paper even mentions that this very interpretation was called fascinating by Christian theologian Dr. Kenneth Keithley. He said he had never come across an interpretation like it before.
Yeah, that's quite an endorsement coming from someone like him. It really shows you how novel this idea is and how much potential it has to change people's understanding of this story. Even people who have studied theology for years are finding this approach fresh and thought-provoking.
So for our listeners out there today, the main takeaway is that this story of the creation of Eve from Adam's rib, it's not just a literal event. It might also be a powerful metaphor. The rib is a symbol for the emergence of us, Homo sapiens. And Eve represents the lineage leading back to mitochondrial Eve, that shared mother of us all. It's a way of seeing that ancient wisdom might be reflecting in its own way the incredibly long and complex story of human evolution.
Absolutely. And it makes us think about the power of these ancient stories. They might have more to say to us today than we realize, especially when we look at them in light of what we know about science and the world around us.
It definitely gives you a lot to ponder, the intersection of those ancient stories and modern science. It's fascinating stuff. Thanks for explaining all this.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.